Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur. I hope that you're doing well. I hope you've had a nice week. I didn't believe in it for a moment, but I gulped down the wine of my own voice. And then I wrestled with the darkness inside me. Knocked it down, clawed at it, ripped it to shreds. That's one of the vākhs, or utterances, from Lalla, the poems of Lal Ded. An absolutely astonishing collection of poetry, very short poems that really function as utterances or sayings from Lal Ded or Lalla, a Kashmiri mystic from the 14th century. And there we have 258 of her sayings, of which 146 are translated in this volume. And I cannot recommend this highly enough. It is a really fascinating window into, of course, a world that so few of us can visit, and due to conflict throughout the 20th century, specifically in the 21st century, that culture in that region has dispersed to a large degree. The translator really discusses how that culture has dispersed, and so these sayings really do transport us to a different time and a very unique, special culture, one that was syncretic in a number of degrees, the way it fused aspects from Indian culture and even the Kashmiri language as it was emerging from Sanskrit and beliefs from Hindu religions, but also fusing that with Persian and Arab influences, influences from Islam, and all of it is in this cauldron of the mind and the heart of Lalla as she, leads her life, having left her home, having pursued a spiritual life. What are her experiences? Some of these sayings are semi-autobiographical. Others focus on her religious practice. A whole number of them focus on meditative breathing techniques, yoga techniques, but they're fascinating. And so I wanted to just read several of them and sort of, put these ideas out there, because I've been reading this really the entire month of May. This will be my penultimate, maybe Midrash 2021 video. And so I was reading about 5 of these a day. And so I just wanted to share some, because while there are so many different ideas that the vākhs move into, there are common themes that emerge. I burnt up the landscape with footprints, looked for him everywhere. Then it hit me. What am I thinking? He's everywhere. Lalla distilled this truth from 100 pieces of talk. Now hear this, people, and go mad. Which has, it's just like this wonderful gnomic sense that like we have a sense of what Lal Ded is trying to share with us, but yet there is this beauty to it. So another one. Love mad, I, Lalla, started out. Spent days and nights on the trail. Circling back, I found the teacher in my own house. What brilliant luck, I said, and hugged him. And so throughout this, one of the themes that emerges is this idea of searching everywhere for that spiritual truth, that spiritual center, for God, and then recognizing that it is within her own, mind, within her own heart, within her own soul, and then celebrating upon that. But there are other ones that, do go into a more mystical realm and have just great imagery. She has ones where she talks about standing, looking, waiting for a ferry. She can't pay the ferryman and she's on a shore, but there's a way in which the same word could exist, that she's on her mind's shore and she can't find the way to pay for the thought she wants to have. So here's another one though. When day is snuffed out, the night glows. The earth swells to touch the sky. The new moon swallows the demon of eclipse. Śiva is worshipped best when thought lights up the self. The imagery in that is just really quite incredible. But there are ones that they become a little more instructive. They're not purely autobiographical. They're a little bit more instructive. And so this is an example of that. You won't find the truth by crossing your legs and holding your breath. Daydreams won't take you through the gateway of release. You can stir as much salt as you like in water. It won't become the sea. And that very first, you won't find the truth by crossing your legs and holding your breath, does feel like an indictment of certain meditation techniques, even though among other vākhs or utterances, she's talking, she's in poetic form describing the different ways she does that. It's really fascinating. But I love that. You can stir as much salt as you like in water, it won't become the sea. That's just an incredible phrase. And I think, that sort of expresses this idea that if something at its core is an idea or an individual or true to itself, you can put something in it and try to adulterate it, but it will remain true to its own core. And it's just, again, really, really enjoyed reading these. This one, again, kind of looks at her own religious practice. Whatever my hands did was worship. Whatever my tongue shaped was prayer. That was Shiva's secret teaching. I wore it, and it became my skin. And then the very next one. Knowledge is a garden. Hedge it with calm. Self-restraint, right effort. Let your past acts graze in it. Goats fatten for the altars of the mother goddess. When the garden is bare, the goats killed, you can walk free. And there are ideas around, what that reveals about the culture and the idea that there could be animal sacrifice, which is sort of one of those, I believe, syncretic aspects that was unique to the Kashmiri culture and religious practice there. But also the idea around the past acts, the idea around the past acts are sort of these goats, and that it is not just storing up the good deeds, the past acts, or the progression through reincarnated lives, but rather this idea that there's a release beyond that, which is kind of curious and again interesting. And then more imagery. The Lord has spread the subtle net of himself across the world. See how he gets under your skin, inside your bones. If you can't see him while you're alive, don't expect a special vision once you're dead. And that kind of loops back to not the previous one, but the one right before that. And then two more to end. Alone, I cross the field of emptiness, dropping my reason and my senses. I stumble on my own secret there, and flowered, a lotus rising from a marsh. And then this last one that really does feel a bit like an indictment of sort of the more traditional religions, around her. What the books taught me, I've practiced. What they didn't teach me, I've taught myself. I've gone into the forest and wrestled with the lion. I didn't get this far by teaching one thing and doing another. And so I just wanted to give a sample of the poetry from Lal Ded. There's just so much beauty. There is the imagery is wonderful, but there's also this sense of a very personal sense that these are insights into her mind and into her beliefs, but they're just the fusion of the imagery and the specificity of her belief, and then the aspects of personal autobiography and practice really just fused together so well, and it made this a really, really enjoyable reading experience. I would also say that this volume, translated by Ranjit Hoskote, is fantastic. It has a 60-page introduction talking about the sort of the provenance of the vākhs, or the utterances or the poems, and how some of those very clearly are written not by a woman in 14th century Kashmiri culture, but are later on either based on the language they're later on, or that they're clearly written by a man or a woman in a very different circumstance, like a marital circumstance than what Lalla was in. And so that historical context is great. And then while the poems are very short, there's a great deal of scholarship at the back, a bunch of endnotes that really focus on different vākhs, or group 2 to 4 of them together and then discuss why they're grouped together, because they all end with the same line talking about Śiva or talking about death. And so it really is just a great, insightful volume, a great introduction to this, as I said, entire culture. And it's a labor of love, because the translator, his family came from that culture, but it was a culture he had not grown up in, and that he really recognizes he would never be able to return to because of conflict and war. So it really is fantastic. The way I read it was, there are 146 of them, so I would read 5 a day, and then I would go back and reread those 5, and maybe if there were 1 or 2 I wanted to read a third time, I would do that. Then I would go look at the endnotes and check those, and after each endnote I would go back and reread that one, or if it was 2 or 3, read those vākhs, and kind of just try to look from the endnotes at what I might have missed on my own readings. And then the next day I would start by rereading the 5 from the previous day kind of through, and then go into the next 5. And so it made it a really great way to just spend time with this writer, to spend time with this amazing mind, this amazing heart, and just explore this culture. So again, I highly, highly recommend this volume. It was something I had been sort of saving for maybe Midrash after this being a Christmas present. But I did want to mention a couple of other works. So another great volume from sort of a parallel culture, though earlier, would be the Penguin Classic Speaking of Śiva, or Speaking of Śiva, which deals with poems from 4 different saints in, was 10th century? Yeah, 10th century AD. So about 400 years earlier. But this is another really great volume that just has a lot of beautiful poetry in it. Of course, there's clear references to ideas found in the Rig Veda. There are references to Sufism, perhaps, and certainly Islam within the poems of Lal Ded, but it's not quite as overt as the Hindi influences. But having read Attar's Conference of the Birds earlier, I was excited to spend a little bit more time exploring those beliefs, those cultures. And then last year I read the poems of the late Taong. And again, this is not the same time, not even the same culture, not the same language. And these aren't primarily religious poems, but there was a lot of great imagery in these as well, and I'll link that video in the description box. In terms of English writing, poets writing in English, the only one I could think of was Emily Dickinson, in part because of the way the poems were so short, the way they seemed to sort of fracture reality to see this one thought. And as this one thought is like an arrow coming at you, it whizzes by these different images that you pass as that arrow comes through. And sometimes I think Emily Dickinson's poetry can be that way. Although as I say that, I would say Emily Bronte's poetry, particularly with the way that has certain Gnostic sensibilities, could fit in as well. So there you go. Let me know if you've ever read Lal Ded, or if there are other Kashmiri writers or poets, other Indian or Persian writers or poets that you would recommend. This was certainly a joy for me, and a writer I'm going to return to and be rereading from. So I hope everybody's doing well. Thanks.